Hi hobby friends, let's talk about the Vindicare Assassin. So, this is not the video I had planned for this week. The video I had planned was revisiting the craft worlds to complete my rainbow squad of Storm Guardians and get the second part of the craft world speed painting videos done. But then two things happened. More than one of my elves did not go to plan exactly, so I wasn't feeling enthused by them, and then the postie brought this. Inspiration had me by the throat, and I had to get him done. The only remaining issues were it was Wednesday, I would be going away on a jolly to see my friends from Friday, and I needed some time to put this video together. Oh, and I wanted this to be at least approaching display level in quality since it is a special edition mini. Okay, challenge accepted, let's go. First things first, let's get this guy a more impressive base. A little 32mm circle seems somewhat underwhelming for such an impressive figure, so I busted out this wooden plinth, gathered some bits and started thinking on my feet. It was about 11 in the morning at this point. I needed the base to be nicely masked, so I got everything but the top surface covered and then started to lay in a milliput cradle. To add a little more work, I decided this guy should be dual purpose. Sure, he needs to look good on his giant plinth, but it is a gaming mini, so we should keep him board legal too. This was achieved by pushing the mini's base into a layer of milliput, then embedding one magnet in the milliput and gluing another magnet to the base. This makes for a neat little socket to hold our guy down when he's on display and has no effect on the original mini's base whatsoever. Alright, technical bit done, let's get back to playing. With my small collection of bits laid out, I started eyeballing and testing out different combinations, trying to get some sense that we were atop the enormous remains of some ancient imperial building. I want to blur the boundary between plinth and mini here, relying on multiple fields of depth and also keep the suspended bits off the plinth itself to heighten that illusion, so lots of fiddling and improvising girders and metalwork here. This kind of stuff is so much fun, just messing around, testing, trimming and gluing until you get something you like. After loads of faffing, I ended up with this and took a break for lunch. It was about 1 PM when I got back to work, and although the milliput wasn't really cured, I couldn't wait around. The base and plinth top both got a good smothering of PVA glue and sprinkled with some tiny rocks, taking care to leave the cradle clear of detritus so everything would still fit snugly. As per usual, I dripped on some isopropyl alcohol to get everything extra hard and dried that little bit quicker. Okay, looking good. Another quick break to let that firm up, and at about 2 PM we can finally get to painting. I succumbed to the need to sub-assemble this guy and gave the plinth, model and statue piece a nice black priming. Although I wanted the two main pieces separate, I still wanted to keep the lighting consistent, so using blue tack I tacked everything in place before starting on my lighting sketch. I've got some grey ink in the airbrush here and I'm working on two sources of light for this, one coming up from the bottom left and one from above and behind the mini to the right. I started with grey here to give myself a little more room for modulation. When the grey portion of the sketch was in, I boosted the intensity with some white in key areas. I'll still be working with opaque paints for a lot of this process, so this whole step is as much about firming up my own ideas and giving myself a guide as it is about actually painting the mini. Alright, the lighting is in, let's start on some colours. The parts that I think of as iron or steel get a filter of burnt sienna to set up their rusty feel, and the statue starts with a base of natural darkish green. This is a very opaque and matte paint, so I want to make sure I'm still reinforcing my lighting with this one, keeping to similar angles and spraying sparingly or not at all in the shadows. With the green down, I move on to turquoise, still keeping to my lighting angle and allowing the spray to be patchy and even splattery. A bit of electric blue in the airbrush, and again, keeping patchy, keeping my angle, I add even more texture. But we're still not done. I also mix in some white into the turquoise and get a really desaturated light colour. By taking off the needle guard and head of the airbrush, I can force it to splatter paint all over the place and start really amping up the texture and mood. The more complexity, the better. Back to the steel bits, a quick splodgy spritz of burgundy increases my visual complexity there too, and then, with some terracotta and orange paint on the palette and a sponge in my tweezers, I stipple on some lovely rusty patches over everything. For the halo, I was looking for an old gold effect, so started by airbrushing in a dull brown and then dry brushing over Vallejo metal colored gold, which has the greenish tinge we associate with some kinds of antique gold. When that was done, out came the copper metallic, and using the fluffiest of my makeup brushes, trying to keep my brush strokes still motivated by the direction of light, the whole of the statue got a good dry brushing. This is a crazily fast way to get a super effective old copper look. You really have to give it a go. While we're dry brushing, let's take care of the rest of the metallics as well, with a similar swoosh from the makeup brush, this time with gunmetal silver. That rust still needs a little more texture though, so I got some pigment powders mixed with a little bit of water and painted in some spots of extra rust. This will dry fairly solid and very, very matte, which looks great for rusty effects. You can also use a little dry pigment straight on the Mini to get that dusty rust look as well. Okay, it's nearly 4 o'clock and we haven't really touched the star of the show, so let's fix that. Here, at least, I'd like to retain as much of the original lighting sketch as possible, so except for his visor and the metallics, which are done in opaque paints, I use exclusively contrast style paints and inks on this. I noticed the box art heavy metal artist went for 2 shades of black to give the Mini some interest, a bluish black for his bodysuit and a greenish black for the gun. No point arguing with the professionals, so I did the same thing, mixing a little blue into a very, very dark grey for the body and a little green into the same grey for the gun. The leather straps got my usual treatment of Vallejo skin wash ink, and the holsters and pouches were done in a reddish brown from Scale 75's instant colour range. A few more details here and there, and in about 50 minutes or so we got him looking like this. Alright, 5:30 and time for oils. On the palette are turquoise, viridian hue, white, burnt umber, and 2 kinds of black. That's right, not all blacks are made the same. The top black you see here is the oxymoronically named ivory black and has a distinctly warmer tone. And the bottom is the Dickensian sounding lamp black, which is noticeably cooler. I use this combo to reinforce the different feel of the zones of black on the Vindicare, the weapon and the steel bits, keeping the cool black for the bodysuit and the warm black, sometimes warmed up even more with the burnt umber, for everything else. This statue is also after a bit of oil, namely all those desaturated blue-greens we associate with verdigris. Here, we're relying on the low surface tension and the pliant nature of oils to mimic the way water pools and reacts with metal. I can feel this script bloating beyond control though, so check out my Tau Commander video for a primer on using oils like this. The oil washes were cleaned up and blended on the Vindicare, of course, and at last the 2 bits can be glued together. With that done, in about 8 or so hours you can go from sprue to this. A pretty nifty looking Mini. But wait, we aren't done. The reason you're looking at a quick phone pic is because I had further plans for this guy. Unfortunately, because it was getting on and I'd been working pretty flat out, I forgot to hit the record button and did not capture anything but this rather dull footage of me cleaning out the airbrush. Super fail, super sorry guys. The plan was to get intense and crazy with the lighting, and so with a combination of yellow, red and magenta ink from that bottom angle and Prussian blue ink from the top, we got something that looks like this. Full spectrum lighting. Just airbrushing lights though can leave things looking a little false and flat, so let's get this tape off the plinth. Probably best to leave this till the very end, but I'd been itching to peel this all day, and get back to the wet palette and plain old acrylic paints. The main goal here is to reinforce our lights with bright edge highlights, fix our lights with glazes, and carve out deeper shadows with dark blocks of paint. This is the part of the process that could spiral out infinitely if you wanted it to, and honestly, although I think of this mini as quote-unquote done, I can definitely see myself coming back to him again to push even harder on these final steps. With all the information there from the airbrush sketch, you can really turn your brain off and let the brush do the talking. It's about as relaxing as painting can get. Important to note here that there is still a lot of colour on my palette. Plain matte black is the death of shadows, so consider using something like a dark blue or dark green instead. As we head into the reveals, let me say a massive thank you to the latest friend to join the patrons on Patreon, the amusingly named Me When Life. Thank you, Me When Life. Your help keeps the paint flowing. If you're interested in helping out, there are still places in the Cheapest Chips OG crew tier available, or you can hit the like and sub button and come join us over on Discord for free. Check the links below. Alright, that is him done. I don't know how clear it is to someone who didn't paint the Mini, but I feel I should mention that the picture is taken with 2 flat-on white lights, so all the lighting on the Mini you're seeing is painted in. I'm pretty happy with how our gaze is guided from those eye-catching sunset hues on the statue up into the hidden Vindicare behind. Sometimes it pays to keep your subject a little pushed back in the composition. It gives more motion and narrative to the piece as a whole. At least, that's what I'm hoping for. What do you guys think? Let me know in the down below, and I'll see you next time.